Hey guys, Ryan Dossey, and in today's video, I want to cover something a little bit more somber, and that's getting your affairs in order if you're an entrepreneur. This might be the most important video you ever watch when it comes to taking care of your family. Let's dive right in. I'm not expecting this video to do super well or go like super viral by any means. We're talking about death. So in general, I don't think that's a fun topic. I think that's right up there with like taxes, right? This past weekend was the memorial service for my Uncle Dan, who passed away late last year. It's kind of rough for me, if I'm being honest. It was the first person I lost that I was really close to. I've had distant relatives and things pass away, but first person that was close to me that I really, really cared about. Fantastic human being. Absolutely honored to have gotten to spend the time with him that I did, and wish that I would have been more present and done some things a little bit differently. So I wanted to just come out the gate and talk through some of these topics that aren't typically addressed when it comes to entrepreneurship. If you're in business for yourself, there are things you have to have lined up for your family. I would go so far as to argue that it's irresponsible to not have some of this stuff done. Whether we like it or not, it's one of those things like, what's the phrase? I think it's Jim Rohn. Life is so risky, none of us get out of it alive, right? It's inevitable. So let's make sure that our ducks are in the row. Before we talk about like what I've done, who I've used, who I recommend you reach out to, I want to just start with kind of an honest fact here. The average male life expectancy in the US right now is something like 77 years old. So if you're in your mid 30s, you're literally half of the way done. I think it makes sense to be aware of that, but also just kind of have that honest perspective of like, what am I waiting for? What am I afraid of? What am I allowing to inhibit? Is it people's opinions? Is it my own insecurity? Like, what would it look like if I got honest about what I want and just got out of my own way and really went after what I feel like I'm called to do, what my life would look like? My uncle was in his mid 50s, in relatively decent health, totally unexpected. I think that's something that we all need to be aware of. We don't know when it's our time. We have another family member right now that's elderly and is dealing with some like cognitive decline. And I can tell you there are things that the family's now scrambling, trying to figure out because it's not documented. It wasn't pre-discussed. It wasn't pre-decided. They don't even have a will. So the first thing you have to get set up in order that you can have done like today is some form of life insurance. If you're in business, there's probably revenue, there's probably expenses, there's probably tax liabilities, there's probably income that your family's used to getting from you, that in the event your number gets called today, all of that just stops. I personally set up a policy several years ago. It's through a group called Bestow, Bestow, not an affiliate, no kickback, no compensation. Got something like $1 million in coverage. When I set it up, it cost me under $100 a month. I think it's like a 20-year term. Now, I do also have whole life. This isn't going to be like a life insurance whole versus term, infinite banking, like not getting into any of that. I have whole life through Guardian as well. So I do have both, but I think it's irresponsible to not have something, especially if you're self-employed, especially if you are the main breadwinner in your household. The second thing that I highly, highly recommend you have set up is like the what happens if I die Google Doc for your spouse. There's probably a lot of things you handle that your spouse just kind of takes for granted that we want them to know how to do. So things like passwords and logins, things like what goes on what form of payment. If you have investments like an IRA or crypto, where are those at? How do they access those? In the event that they can't ask you the question. Having something set up on your computer like LastPass or even just like Google's password manager or Apple's, and your spouse knowing how to get into that can go a long way towards like feeling kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. The third thing, and probably the most in-depth, is this guy right here. And that's kind of like all of the legal paperwork. We used a group called the Rains Law Firm based out of Denver, Colorado. They were highly recommended to us from folks that we like and trust. Really wasn't that terrible. I want to say it was like $3 to $5 grand. It did take a couple months to get through the entire process. I can tell you though, on the other side of it, it's like, I'm so glad that's done. As we were talking about this family member with the cognitive issues, my wife was like, I'm so glad that we have this stuff handled in our 30s that, you know, God willing, we don't need for another 50, 60 years. So we have, for instance, like our house is in a trust in the event that I pass away. It doesn't have to go through any process or anything with the state. That's handled. I've got dictated my personal effects and what I want to have happen with those. If you have like siblings or parents, the last thing you want is like people to kind of have to figure out or guess, well, what would they have wanted? Where should this go? Who should get that? Down to like who gets which of my guitars is covered. We've got in here like medical power of attorney, release of all my medical information, her ability to make decisions on my behalf, as well as what I actually want. Like what measures do I want taken, to what extent, what should they prioritize? She doesn't have to try to make those tough decisions. I've already made them and documented them for her. We've even covered things like, do I want to be buried or cremated? What happens to my ownership interests in the properties and companies that I'm involved with? All the way down to when my life insurance does pay out, where should those proceeds go? How should they be handled? What does my son's trust setup look like? None of this is sexy or fun, but you're gonna need it, or your spouse is gonna need it. One thing that I'm gonna be working on this year is additional content specifically for my kiddo. I want him to hear from me in my own words through video how I feel about him, how I hope he would navigate key life moments or tough decisions in the unfortunate and hopefully unlikely event that I'm not there by his side. While it's fun to talk about how to make $30,000 or $60,000 or how to flip houses or how to get more real estate listings, fact of the matter is, if you follow this video and you spend a couple grand, it could save your family a lot of heartache, hassle, and way more than what it's going to cost you. The ROI on this is pretty stupid. If you have business partners, it might also be a good idea to talk about things like key man insurance. It's basically life insurance taken out by the company on you to assist the company in filling that gap should you no longer be there. Realize that tomorrow's not guaranteed. We're all going to die at some point. So get your affairs in order, make sure that you have life insurance, and most importantly, make the phone calls you need to make. Show up how you want to show up, because you might not get to tomorrow. Late last summer, prior to him passing away, we got to actually spend some time together in North Carolina. He got to meet my son. Some of those pictures and videos are some of my favorite I have with him. I've also got some old voice memos saved in my phone that are a lot of fun to be able to have and go back and listen to. Hopefully me sharing a little bit of my experience on this helps you for when, unfortunately, you're going through something similar. As entrepreneurs and business people, we are aware that life is risky, but a lot of us don't set up things to mitigate that risk for our family. I personally sleep better at night knowing all of this is done for mine, and I hope you'll do the same thing for yours. Thank you guys for taking the time to hang out with me on today's little bit more morbid but super practical video. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys next time.